Gift acceptance policies. These are incredibly important because it defines the kinds of gifts that you're willing to accept. You as a church, not the treasurer, you as a church are not required to accept every gift that comes your way. Have any of you ever been offered or received a gift that you wish you would not have taken? We had some trouble with that last year. Some land, real estate. In my research, one church received a yacht. You would think that might be something, you could sell it. It cost more to sell it than the yacht was worth. Okay? You are not required to accept any contribution that comes your way. What if somebody wants to contribute to the church a collection of artwork that's a little bit questionable in terms of appropriateness? Do you have to take it? Do you have a policy that says? It'd be better to have a policy. We take gifts that fit the mission and values of the church, okay? And we're going to evaluate if it's an in-kind gift, whether we're going to take it or not. The gift acceptance policies can be pretty simple. These are samples. I've got the source at the end. Board Source. Any of you familiar with Board Source? Oh my, you need to know about Board Source. They are a nonprofit organization that helps nonprofit organization in governance, in procedures and policies. This is the nonprofit policy sampler. Gives you online access to 6 or 7 policies in each of these categories. They had 7 gift acceptance policies. You buy the book, it's not that expensive, $100 or so, but then you've got access to all, and you download them, you type in your name, you customize it however you want, and I've called them several times to say, is it okay for me to share this? And they say, yes, that's what it's for. Don't reinvent the wheel. Take a look at some samples, see what fits your organization, and copy it. So this is one of them. This is their first sample of a gift acceptance policy. The board shall have the right to refuse contributions. That allows you to refuse the art collection. It allows you to refuse a yacht. It allows you to refuse a farmhouse and 80 acres. Okay? So this would be a minimum. And these are not all church related, they're nonprofit. So some of them, the language is a little bit less churchy than ours might be. Sample number 2 goes not only into gift acceptance, but also moves into an investment policy a little bit. Do your churches, do you receive gifts of stocks or mutual funds? You might want to think about it because people can gift stocks or mutual funds to a nonprofit organization and not have to pay taxes on the gain. We're set up so that comes into our Edward Jones account. Our policy is sell it immediately. We're not in the practice of trying to time the market. If you can time the market, you may want to make a different investment policy. We sell it immediately and then put the proceeds in our checking account or into our BBT investment account. So this would be a little bit more complex. The one that I like best in gift acceptance policies admits that, yes, we do solicit gifts, not so much grants, but we are conscious that some may jeopardize our tax-exempt status. Our board, in our case, we would change that to say our board would have the authority to solicit and or accept gifts. But it's our church's responsibility and our board's responsibility to pursue the mission, goals, and objectives. So in this policy, they don't say what we will and will not accept. There's a list of criteria or a list of questions that are in the gift acceptance policy. For example, is the gift consistent with the church's principles, standards, and values? Does it fit with what the church is doing? Does it challenge the ability of the church to further its mission and goals? Is it compatible? Is there any public relations problem? Is there a perceived conflict of interest between the donor and the church? I can imagine some scenarios where that could be a problem. For example, somebody who wants to have a permanently restricted, think, endowment fund for something that the church isn't doing or doesn't want to do. But that person maybe is a fairly good donor to the church. Do you have to do what that donor wants you to do? Consistency, is it consistent with the other kinds of fundraising we're trying to do? If there is some sort of conflict that arises, will it jeopardize the stability of the church? Will it create a rift? And if it's an in-kind gift, think of our art collection, will that create a problem? And the source of the gift. You don't like to turn money away, but sometimes the source is not completely charitable. And so you need to be able to have some way to say, well, our board has reviewed this and we thank you for your generosity, but it would be better if you would do it this way. This will protect you in many ways. One of the problems that we had in our church was people giving gifts to the church that they wanted to go to this particular person to help that person out. Can't do that. That's a donor-advised fund. If you set it up as a fund, you can lose your tax-exempt status. The person who made the contribution does not receive contribution credit for that kind of gift. So you need to have something that will allow the board to say, we're very sorry, we can't do that. We have a special gifts list. Things that we would like to have in our church that we don't yet have. And when there are memorials given in the name of someone, we go to the family and say, you know, this could be unrestricted. Or if you would like something special, here's a list of things that you could choose from. They're pre-approved, so to speak. So it's not them saying we want it to be for a specific thing. It's a choice from a list. We're running out of things on the list, though. I mean, people seem to be wanting to give for not tangible things, but programs more often. And so as we're developing our gift acceptance policy, we're also developing a way for people in the church to find sources of funds. So a way to determine how those funds will be spent. And that will enter into it too. What do we do with the memorial gifts? But the list has served us well for about 10, 12 years. Any other questions? Are you getting some ideas of things you want to take home? I wanted to talk a little bit about document retention too. As long as you're going to be cleaning out your archives and your offices and your filing cabinets, let's talk about what you need to keep and what you don't need to. Of course, articles of incorporation, bylaws, we talked about that. Titles and deeds, you keep forever. These are things that you keep forever. Tax-exempt certificates. How many of you filed a Form 990? A Form 990. It's the nonprofit organization annual return for the IRS. Churches are not required to file one. Churches are not required to file a 990 unless you want to claim a refund of your employment taxes under the small business health care premium tax credit. I'll tell you about that in just a minute. It's a good one. In Indiana, we've got NP20s we need to file, state nonprofit filings, business entity reports. Make sure that you know what's required in your state for a nonprofit organization and for a church. Also, in terms of contributions, permanent files need to be kept for bequest and estates, memorial gifts register, and for pledge registers and journals. Permanent. This can be summary data. It doesn't have to be every payment. Also permanent. All charts of accounts that you've used, when you keep the old one, when you replace it with an updated one. All budgets, General and special fund ledgers, general and special fund journals, annual financial statements. Any audit reports need to be kept permanently. Employee earnings records, but summarized. You don't need to keep the monthly payroll data, but a summary of earnings records and payroll registers. And all the pension plans, the copies of the pension plans. How many people use BBT? Keep their documents. For 7 years, you need to keep bank statements, bank deposit records, how many of you get canceled checks? This is an old list. And check register. For disbursements, you keep the invoice and the paid bills for 7 years. For employment, the payroll journals, the pension records, employment taxes, and Form I-9 now for just 7 years. And then the individual pledge and plate receipts, the weekly, you keep for 7 years. The other two categories that are common, for 2 years, the bank reconciliations. After 2 years, you can get rid of the reconciliations, but keep the bank statements for 7 years. And your monthly financial statements, after 2 years, you can keep just the annual. And for anything for capital expenditures, you need to keep for 30 years. So while you're going through cleaning things out, you know what to put in your permanent file, what to put in the box that says throw away in 2019. Okay? And you can start to discard some of those things. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is something that I should have done a long time ago and didn't, and I kept getting taken by surprise. What do you do through the year? And oddly enough, it doesn't change much from year to year, but I get caught by surprise every July because I don't have the budget worksheets ready. Okay? So this is what I do. We could probably add to this and make a fairly nice calendar if you pitch in what you do too. January, you've got to get your W-2s to your employees by the last day of January. Provide your 1099s to vendors. As of last year, it was still $600 was the threshold. Anybody you spend over $600 with, you need to provide a 1099. That includes any people working in the church, like if you don't pay your organist and as an employee and you pay that person more than $600, that person needs to receive a 1099. File your quarterly 941 from the previous year. Prepare your year-end financial statements. February, the W-3 has to go in to summarize all the W-2s, as well as the 1096 that summarizes the 1099s. Oftentimes people send them all in when they provide the W-2s. I tend to wait, just in case somebody comes back and says, this isn't right. So I wait until people have had a chance to look at them. And how many of you file your COB statistical report on time? Oh, I never get it done by March 1st. Never. That's the other one that comes up and bites me every year. In March, file the 990T if you have fewer than 25 full-time equivalent employees, if you pay more than half the insurance premiums for those employees. Anybody have that situation so far? Yeah? You can get a credit from the U.S. government for the amount of Medicare withheld from the employee's checks, Medicare paid by the church for the employee, and any income tax withheld. I know, it makes absolutely no sense. Huh? I know, it's not our liability. But that's how the small business insurance premium tax credit was designed to encourage small employers to pay health insurance for their employees. As a business owner, I can do the same thing as long as I have fewer than 25 employees and pay more than half the premiums. I can take a credit for all the premiums I have paid up to a certain limit. To do it for nonprofit organizations, since we don't pay income taxes, they're giving us a refund of Medicare paid and the amount of federal income tax withheld from employees' checks. I know, It's a gift. That gift amounted for our church in 2010 to nearly $5,000, and in 2011, nearly $7,000. Gift. There was some concern about whether we really wanted to accept that gift. We talked about gift acceptance. It sounds slimy, but it's not. It's absolutely legal. Except what they did, I just found this out, you can do it for 2010, 2011, and we've got a couple more years coming. They started it in 2010, but didn't have any documentation to tell you how to do it. So when I was doing the 2011, I thought, I've got to find out how to do this. I know there's money coming, but I couldn't find the documentation. As I was reading the documentation, it said, if you neglected to claim the 2010, you may do so now without any penalty. I thought, neglected to claim? You didn't tell me how to do it. So I did both of them. And you kind of have to watch them. I found out last week they sent a correction that I had originally claimed just under $5,000, and then they gave me a credit of $2,000 to make it just under $7,000. And I called him, I said, that was for 2 different years. Oh, really? Well, we'll have to go pull it. So now they're looking to see, I want my other $5,000 also. So you kind of have to follow up with them. I'm not sure they know what they're doing either. It is a gift. So anybody who has fewer than 25, the interesting thing is you don't withhold, most of you, I assume, do not withhold Medicare on clergy, correct? Right. Okay. But clergy count in terms of whether you pay insurance for them or not, how much you're paying in insurance. They do not count in terms of full-time equivalent. It doesn't make sense. Somebody's going to figure out sometime that this doesn't make sense. April, Q1, that should be a 941, sorry. And in Indiana, we have to file a nonprofit Form 20 every year. It's just an informational return. July, the worksheets, you're getting started with your budget for next year. September, prepare the final budget, prepare council meeting. October, our ancillary insurance comes due November 1st, so I have to figure out after the budget's passed what the new long-term disability calculations are for the next year. In November, the BBT pension calculations, they like to have those by the 15th of December. And in December, help review the contracts for the following year before setting up payroll for next year. Okay, I talked more than I wanted to. I'm going to put my sources up here. When you get the PowerPoint, if you pull it up and you're connected to the internet, you can go to the board source webpage where there are lots of resources for nonprofit organizations. Christian Computing Magazine is where I had the comparison of the softwares. They've got a nice checklist, and they do, I only picked 5. They've got 20 or 25 of them that they're comparing. And when I was out of the country, I was in places where there were not churches of the brethren, so I joined up with the Episcopals as the only English-speaking congregation in the area, so I rely on the Episcopal organization. They tend to be more, shall I say, legalistic than we are, something like that. And the records retention, a good source, or a good part of it came from the Episcopal Manual for Treasurers. So, and then I will put here my email address for those of you who didn't get it earlier. If you email me, I will send this presentation to you so you can click on the links and improve it. Yep, I do.
Who does that come from?
Property chair. Our custodian sits on the property commission and he reviews the bills to make sure we're within the limits of what he thinks that we should be experiencing at that time of the year. We email the property chair and tell him how much it is. He says approved. Attach the email, copy the email to the bill. It comes to me. I prepare the check. I set it out on Sunday morning for 2 of our 5 check signers to sign, and the church secretary then mails it off on Monday. I think that probably comes from 1931 or something. Yeah.
So you're not making that recommendation to all of us, that's just
No, no, not at all. My recommendation would be determine a dollar amount where you'd like to have 2 check signers, $500 or something like that. It's silly to have it for every $4.37 reimbursement for snacks for Sunday school. We do not, but it's renewable annually. So if they decide not to have me anymore, that would be fine. Any term limits on the treasurer?
We do.
What's your limit?
2 3-year terms.
2 3-year terms?
The learning curve, there is so much to learn about. It's difficult to turn that job over.
It is hard. It takes at least 3 years to understand what you're supposed to be doing without making any improvements in the policies and procedures. Any other term limits? Do you have term limits? 2. Okay. 2 4-year terms? Okay. Anybody else? 2 3-year terms? It would seem that if you have 2 3-year terms, you might also want to have an assistant treasurer, or in any of our cases, have an assistant treasurer who during the second 3-year term is learning and can begin some their own 2 3-year terms, because the learning curve is terribly steep, especially if you're doing payroll too, and if you're doing a software change in the middle of that, that's an awful lot. What I would say your responsibility is, ask the questions. Ask the questions. It's not your responsibility to make the changes. Right. But as treasurer, it's your job to say, let's make sure we're doing what we need to do here. Mm-hmm. How are we set up? How should it be set up? Do we need to make any changes? Get the ball rolling by asking, and keep asking questions if you're still not comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable inside, then keep asking. I go back from a meeting and say, we were talking about this and it really raised this concern. Explain to me how this works. I don't feel like I've got a good sense of it. And so keep asking until you're comfortable. Yes? I am not.
Church in my district that pays their treasurer.
I'm a paid church treasurer. No, actually, I'm not paid for the treasurer. I'm paid for the accounting part of it. I volunteer as treasurer. But that's also why I feel like I need to do something with it. Volunteers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, if we can find out ways that make our work better, that we can work with each other to get some answers, we won't struggle so much alone, I think it would be a good thing. One of the other suggestions we had last year in terms of reviewing, we usually can't afford audits. We cannot. I mean, they're too expensive. Even our church can't. But if you've got a couple of treasurers that you know in a neighboring church, switch. And it's not a completely independent audit, but it is another set of eyes looking at the records.